Order, please. Rise for Mayor Michael Fougere.
Please be seated, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to the December 18th meeting of City Council, the last meeting of 2017. If I could have a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll move the agenda.
As amended?
As amended.
Yes, okay. Seconder, please. Councillor Hawkins. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll start with public notice, bylaws, and related reports. First report is CR 17-130. Oh, I'm sorry, the minutes, yes. Minutes for the November 27th meeting. Councillor Findera, seconder. Councillor Young. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we'll go to CR 17-130, which is a zoning bylaw amendment for the Chuka Creek Business Park Phase 1. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. Can I get someone to second this and I'll speak to it?
Seconder? Okay. Councillor Flagel.
Thank you. So what you're being asked is to change the designation so that, in fact, development can begin in this area. This is consistent with the plan that has been before Council before. It's just that we're going to take it from urban holding and actually put light in medium industrial. This is adjacent to an existing facility that's out there. Again, I say consistent with the plans that were before you. And what is interesting is that you'll know that previously in this area, a container yard was proposed. It's actually under construction. So it appears that the folks are very serious about this area in terms of development, and some of it is happening right now. So we would seek your concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Are there any speakers to the report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have two bylaws. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you very much. I move, seconded by Councillor Young, that bylaws 2017-52 and 54 be introduced and read a first time.
Mr. Clerk.
City Council will now consider the following bylaws requiring a public hearing as required under the Planning and Development Act. Number 217-52, to reduce the servicing agreement fees and the development levy fees on industrial zone lands. And number 217-54, respecting the proposed rezoning to accommodate the first phase of development within the Chuka Creek Business Park area. If there is anyone in the gallery that would like to address council on either of these proposed bylaws, I would ask that you indicate your intention at this time. There is no one, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'll call the vote on first readings in favor. Opposed? It's carried. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. I move, seconded by Councillor Flagel, that bylaws 2017-52 and 54 be read a second time.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. I move, seconded by Councillor Murray, that Council hereby consents to bylaws 2017-52 and 54 going to a meeting at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that bylaws 2017-52 and 54 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much, Councillor Bryce. We'll now move into delegations, communications, and related reports. Our first delegation is Garth Fredrickson. Good afternoon, Mr. Fredrickson. If you could identify yourself and who you have with you. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of City Council. My name is Garth Fredrickson, and I am with Bison Properties Limited. With me tonight is Pat Mangle, who is the owner of Advanced Collision Limited, and his company will be occupying the building located at 2410 Victoria Avenue East. I just want to say that we are in full support of both the administration's and the City of Regina's Planning Commission recommendations, and that we are here tonight to answer any questions that you may have of us, and to say thank you in advance for your support on this discretionary use application.
Thank you very much. Are there questions of the delegation? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, gentlemen. Thanks for being here. we're going to pick up on a conversation we had at Planning Commission. I'd like everybody to hear a little bit about what's going on here. Sure. So likely, Mr. Mangle, I'm going to get you to do some of the talking if you don't mind. So, Mr. Mayor, first one is, tell us what business it is that you're wanting to put into this space.
I own Advanced Collision, which is a auto body shop or a collision repair facility.
Thanks very much. So tell me what's important to you as I drive past your building or as I live in the neighborhood, and the impact it may or may not have on the neighborhood, please.
What's important to me is the location, curb appeal of that location. We're in the business of fixing your vehicle, which historically is the second largest purchase you're ever going to make. So that our theory, or the way that things go in our industry, is that if we present a good positive image, good curb appeal, you'd be more than likely to trust me to repair that vehicle or that investment than you would the guy down the street who has a shoddy looking business, I guess.
Gotcha. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm curious, am I going to smell, hear noise, see debris, those types of rundown type of concerns that neighbors might have?
Not at all. You won't. We're regulated by strict environmental governances from the federal government and at the provincial government level as well. So the smells, the pollution, the debris, everything like that, we have to contain and dispose of in environmentally friendly ways. And the debris laying around the shop and everything, that goes back to the curb appeal. And that's just something that we just don't accept in our business.
Thanks very much. We had a couple of folks, Mr. Merritt, who came to Planning Commission and expressed some concerns. Did you talk to them after?
We did, yeah. We had a meeting with the, I don't know the name of the condominium association, but they're located directly behind the business.
Yep.
And we had a nice little chat for about a half an hour, and I think that we answered a lot of their questions, and I'm going to be their neighbor, or hopefully I'm going to be their neighbor, so I want to be on good terms with them. So I think we're going to work together to make sure that they're happy before we get in there and do what we have to do.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. It seemed to me that these folks were coming forward looking for some answers, and it seems that you provided some information for them. Are they here tonight, by the way?
I don't think so.
No, they're not here. Thank you. My last one is a little bit about the structure. So, and the configuration that goes in behind the alley and so on. Because one of the things we often hear about development is about traffic. So tell me, in your words anyway, how much traffic does this bring to the area? And maybe throw in a little bit about parked vehicles, if you don't mind.
Most of our business is done by appointment only. Other than somebody who might drive up for a basic estimate or to drop off paperwork or do a consultation of the repair. Having said that, if you're going to put a retail store in that location, I think we had mentioned this when we had met prior, there would be more traffic congestion, more traffic flow with a retail space, whereas where sort of the vehicle arrives, it's outside for a brief period of time, half an hour to an hour maximum. It's brought in and it's repaired. So most of our parking is contained within the building, as is the traffic flow itself.
Good, thanks. Last question, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor. I'll direct this to Mr. Frederickson as the landowner. Talk a little bit about fencing in behind. Do you want to just describe the situation and the impact, or what could or cannot be done in terms of fencing, and maybe even a little bit about grass or trees?
Yeah, there's obviously we're given direction by the administration with respect to fencing, and in this case it would be privacy fencing. And so we will follow the lead of the administration in terms of what they would like to see, and we will provide that. If there's an opportunity to do some landscaping, some additional landscaping, something that would freshen up the look of that, because we're sensitive to the fact that there is residential located across the alley. We'll take that into consideration as well, and try and make it look as good as we can make it look.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Flagle.
Thank you, gentlemen. Welcome back. Just one thing, well, two actually. But one was, I'm going to probably bring an amendment forward, and I think you and I talked about this. The height of the fence is 6 feet across the board in the city. we, talking to you and talking to planning and talking to the residents and going out and visually looking, would you be okay with looking at maybe a 7 to 10 foot high fence? Because you got to put a new one up anyway, so would you be okay with that? Because I think that's what the amendment is going to read because of the visual. Are you okay with that?
Through your worship, in answer to that, yes, we want to work together. And actually in conversations with Pat, he was thinking a little higher fence as well. And in my research with administration, it became, I became aware because it's a privacy fence, we can build up to like 12 feet if we wanted to.
Right.
So you're fully within in that range to suggest higher than 6 feet, because in some cases, depending on what the purpose of the fence is, you can't go beyond 6 feet, but here it's already allowed.
Yeah, okay, good. That was basically the old thing, and traffic will be low compared to, and this was something we talked about, but you're saying about 10 vehicles a day?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Restaurants would be like 50 a day, 75 a day. So
Flood
it's
records.
totally different. Anyway, that's all I want to do, because that's what I'm going to bring forward. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Councillor Fundura.
Thank you, Worship. Quick question. I sat at the back at the planning, and I heard you speak, and I heard the condo association speak. So the question to you, Mr. Fredrickson, what would you say to the condo association and the condominium owners in that area? What are they going to see as a neighbor? What would they expect as the owner of the property?
Yeah, I mean, we try very hard. We have a lot of properties along that area, and we try our utmost to have a very presentable real estate front and back. And this will be no different. With the privacy fence, they'll see, they'll see, if they can see over, they'll just see a compound. And what Pat is going to use that compound for is parking for the 9 employees that work in the business. So we have way more than adequate parking. And as Pat was saying, the vehicles are inside. They're not outside for any longer than a half hour or 45 minutes. And then they get to work, and then they work their way through that, through the process inside the building. And then when they come out, they might be there for a couple hours, I guess. And so they're going to see a well-run, good-looking business. Probably with and a lot of the parts, if I understand correctly, Pat, come in through the front.
That's right,
yeah. So they won't even see those deliveries occurring because they'll be occurring in the front. So with the business that we had before, which was a carpet store in there, they had quite a significant amount of traffic, truck traffic, coming and going, either bringing product in or taking it out. So I think they will see a reduced volume of traffic to the rear of the building.
Thank you. Through your worship, Mr. Mega. I drove by your present location, and I see when you said you are very, very good about doing your business and how you are in the neighborhood. So the question is about, to the questions I had a conversation with the condo association. They're talking about the doors, like your shop doors open when you're fixing vehicles.
Currently?
No, in the new location.
In the new facility? As I mentioned before, we deal with the paints and the adhesives and the things that we use to repair your vehicle are very susceptible to environmental conditions. So we like to keep a controlled environment. It's got to be between 72 and 76 degrees Fahrenheit with certain humidities and everything. So very rarely do we have the doors open for a prolonged period of time, if at all.
Okay, so through your worship. And then the question, again, from the neighborhood about the type of work you do, and I understand, I see what's happening is that there's an invitation of vandalism or theft happening. So the questions would be from the neighborhood, because the condominium associations are worried about the alley,
right,
their own personal vehicles that are parked there. If let's say you were inviting, the gates are wide open and you're just leaving your stuff around here, certain individual come, they'll borrow some from you, and then they'll start borrowing from the residents that are live along the alley. What do you say to make the neighborhood comfortable about what you're going to be doing, that you're not going to be inviting any kind of difficulties in the area? To your worship?
We're in the business of repairing insurance claims, and a large portion of that insurance claim business is the theft, recovery, or break and enter into a vehicle. We're responsible for that ultimately if we have your vehicle in our possession while we're repairing it. So that's another reason we don't store cars or leave cars outside for a prolonged period of time. When we leave the building at night, everything that's outside, if there is anything outside, is brought inside and left there overnight.
Okay, to your worship. And then the gate, because you do have a gate.
The gate
back
is locked,
there.
yeah.
The gate's locked.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I don't understand how the exhaust and things when you paint and the fumes going in it.
Right.
General public, or let's say the area, they don't understand what comes out of that
Right.
exhaust vent. What's happening there? You said you're not going to smell anything, but explain that process.
Well, we are governed on a federal level through environmental impact laws to spray water-based paint and waterborne paint-related items. So basically we're spraying a pigment with water used as a thinner. Now that cuts down on the VOCs, or the volatile organic compound pollution. Everything that's done in our paint booth is put through three separate levels of particulate and pollution and fume filtration. So there's three different stages, similar to a HEPA filter in your vacuum. If you're sucking up something, it runs through that filter system repeatedly before it comes out the exhaust. That's what happens in our paint booth.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Two more questions and I'll be done. We already discussed fence. So if I'm asking about a fence, what do you mean by fence? Is it going to be a solid fence, solid fence, so you cannot see through? Is it going to be a chain link fence? What's the construction? I mean, you are asked to put up a fence, but...
Well, if I may, Your Worship, currently there's a chain link fence there that's 6 feet in height. And so what would be allowed by the city is another chain link fence, but it would have to have the privacy slats installed. Okay? And so we've been planning to put a new fence there, and actually Pat and myself were just talking tonight that we may do a combination of solid fence and chain link. We're not quite sure exactly what we plan on doing, but we discussed also meeting with the condominium association behind to see if they had any preference in terms of the type of look that they wanted to see. So I don't have a specific answer, but it'll obviously be within the guidelines of what the administration is going to suggest to us. So I think there's a range of possibilities. I'm just not sure exactly what they are.
Okay, so the final question would be to Your Worship, is that the condominium association, individuals, residents that are there, you are welcoming to have any kind of discussion with them?
Oh, for sure we are. Yeah.
Okay.
I want to be a good neighbor. I don't want to have to work against them or have any complaints. Ultimately, they are a potential customer for me. One of the things that we like to do is we like to include ourselves and promote and help the area that we're in. We're big through promotion of sports teams and charitable donations and things like that. So I'd like to help out the community associations and the condo association and be a member of the community more so than just trying to make a buck.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you,
Thank you, Councilor Ventura. Councilor Brashani.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for coming forward. Just one question, just to be clear, you will be beside the Point Flex Dance Company, is that accurate? And as well as the Visions. And the buildings, are they actually connected together? And so the question I have is, with the ventilation system above, to ensure that fumes and everything do not go through the building, what will you be doing to ensure that it stays in there and it's filtrated out so that it's not, environmentally unfriendly as well?
Right. The buildings are separated by a 3-inch concrete wall. Inside that 3-inch concrete wall is a layer of 4-inch insulation and then drywall. And then there's another layer of drywall and a void space of 7/8 of an inch and another layer of drywall. All of that has to be caulked and mudded and taped according with the fire code regulations. So that's going to stop any vapor from getting out. Likewise, any of the paint spraying or any of the primers or strong adhesives we do in the paint booth. And then that's run through the filtration system I had mentioned before.
Okay. So just to be clear, so the walls, you'll be doing some work, but the ventilation system above, so I guess the question I'm asking, the ventilation system is not connected throughout the whole building?
No.
So it's just your own room? Okay, good. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Brashani. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. So you've answered some questions about airflow and keeping doors open. There's other auto body places in wards that I hear about that do leave their doors open when they're grinding and sanding and doing that sort of thing. And the dust comes out and people complain about noise and the dust and everything. So how do you do it differently than that? Through your worship?
We just run a more professional operation, I guess. We're, as I mentioned before, we're all about the curb appeal. We're concerned about the environment. We're concerned about your vehicle and you as a customer. And I don't know how guys do that. The chemicals that we use and the things that we do are very susceptible, as I mentioned before, to the environmental heat, humidity, temperature, airflow are paramount in what we do. If guys are doing that, you probably don't want those guys repairing your car because they're not adhering to the proper guidelines and they're not using the products properly.
Thank you. So we're never going to hear a noise complaint or a dust complaint come?
I hope it comes to me first, and then I will address it with that person and make sure that that person is happy with the problem. And we'll do our best to make sure that we don't have that happen again.
Thank you. Glad to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Other speakers to the report? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery. I thank you for answering those questions, and we'll now consider the report. This is Report 131, which is an application for a repair shop at 2410 Victoria Avenue East. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder, please?
Seconder for Councillor Young.
Thanks very much. I think you heard specifically both from the landowner and the proponent for the business that it is a auto body shop going into an existing building. The building is attached with other operations occurring in there. What this does is it meets all of the requirements that we had asked. In other words, parking is fine and so on. But I have to tell you that the residents that came forward had very sound argument. They just really wanted to know. And when Mr. Mango came forward and Mr. Frederickson came forward and spoke, they answered a lot of questions at Planning Commission about a surety. In other words, traffic impact, which we hear a lot about, isn't going to occur here. In fact, as was stated earlier, probably less vehicles. It is highly regulated industry in terms of smells or debris and so on. And I would tell you that Mr. Mengel has handled himself very well because not only did he assure Planning Commission and us tonight, I believe, but went right back to the neighborhood and said, we'll meet again. And I thought that that was a very telling feature about what type of neighbor and business he runs. We were very comfortable with this. We would seek concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Flagel.
Thank you. I rise in support of this too. And the environmental thing is, this wasn't a non-issue because the question was brought up to Mr. Mango is that he doesn't look like the typical auto body owner because there's no paint on it. And it used to be always that the owners always were full of paint and they'd come here and they'd have, all they'd had was the mask on and paint all around them. Today, that's a totally different world. So, and I know some other body shops and they're more environmentally friendly than probably a lot of other restaurants, other places in the city. I mean, we drive around and we drive by a restaurant and we can smell it for 3 days in our car. Well, that's not going to happen with an auto body shop. And we know of some of the restaurants that the smells. Now, the thing I want to bring forward is either I can, and I lost it here. I can either do an amendment or I can add it to number 3 at the bottom, and recommendation number C is the reason the height restriction or the height of the fences are 6 feet tall. And the reason that this should be higher is generally when you stand on at the back door, and I drove by there and I looked at it, if you stand at the back door of this property and you look straight out, all landscaping slopes down. So that 6-foot fence that's there today visually is probably only at 4.5 feet because the landscaping drops. So the people on the side of the back alley, the condo people, visually will only see, they'll partially see into the building. If you raise it to 7, 8, you guys can decide. That's my motion is going to be. So if we just add this, that a solid fence along the north property aligned to mitigate any visual impact to the adjustment for the residential neighborhood be, pick a number, 7 to 12 feet, and let the administration and the developer decide. Because I don't know exact, maybe 9 feet is the exact number that should be there. So if we could add that, or I can do a complete amendment to it. So totally up to the clerk and.
Councillor Flanagan, would you accept an amendment that says that the applicant is required to develop a solid fence up to 12 feet along the north property line?
However you want to word it. As long as it's up to, but because it's not enough.
Up to 12 feet?
Sure.
Okay, if you're okay with that, I'll ask for a seconder for that.
Yeah.
Council? Okay, discussion on the amendment. On the amendment? Okay.
Your Worship, on an amendment on the fence, are we just talking about the height, or are we talking about a solid fence, or what we want to see there? Can we do that?
It's the height of the fence.
Height of the fence? Okay.
Height of the fence. On the amendment, any other speakers? Councillor Murray, you're speaking to the main amendment? Okay. Call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. You have just under 3 minutes left on your speaking time.
Just a couple of comments. Yeah, we talked about parking and traffic. And typically, we talked about Fuddruckers, which is like 3 doors away. They get 50 to 100 vehicles a day. This place is going to get 10. So the traffic impact is going to be a lot less. Totally in support of this. I think it's a good idea, and I think the residents will be happy. Mr. Mangle and Mr. Frederickson and Mr. Goldman were here too as well, and it was a good. I think it's a good fit for the neighborhood. So appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Councillor Murray.
Administration knows. So just as a refresher, can I get the exact decibel amount that we are talking about and the time frames for when we're talking about that intermixing of commercial? If anyone knows that.
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, I might ask Mr. Searle if he has the exact decibel for that.
Mr. Searle.
Your worship, I don't have that information in front of me. I believe the acceptable range is in the neighborhood of 70 to 90 decibels.
Okay, thank you. And then my next question is around environmental concerns. Is it solely with the Ministry of the Environment, or do we work also through our bylaw enforcement with our fire?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, so the applicant would have to go through the Ministry of Environment for their permits, and so we would deal with that. If there was any complaints about the property, such as untidy, unsightly, then we would go through our bylaw enforcement, and if there was environmental concerns, then that might get referred to Ministry of Environment.
Sure. So my question is just we do have the ability to inspect that site for compliance on those things.
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, there is complaints, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Fundura.
Thank you, Worship. Through the administration, lots of discussion on the fence. So discussing things with the condo association, their big thing was the back alley and that fence, because they have an issue further down the line, and nothing has to do with what we're talking about tonight. So they were asking about what is a solid fence, and they are disagreeing. They're not disagreeing about what's coming here. I mean, they do not want to stand in the way of progress or community kind of living together and businesses and residential and all that. So, but they would like to be heard. So they were heard. But they're asking about, and I'm asking, fence. I see the fence next door to it, the car wash and the gas station, they have a solid wooden fence. So I'm not sure if we could direct the owner or to what kind of fence is going to put up, but the residents that are behind it, they do not like to see another chain link fence with the plastic stuff that goes through the stuff. So that's the only thing that they have issues with, to your worship. So
Charlotte.
Through you, your worship. So we'll work with the applicant. It is the intent that it is a solid fence, and our recommendation will be that we work with the condo association and the applicant to find a suitable material that'll meet both the applicant and the condo's requirements.
Okay. Your worship, through you, to the administration. Question for myself, and I know how things work, but the question from the condo again. If something goes not the way it's supposed to, what recourse do the residents in the areas have? Your worship.
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, as indicated earlier, if there's anything that, with respect to the conditions of the permit where the applicant isn't abiding by those conditions, then we would take enforcement action and perhaps legal if we need to go that far. If there's bylaw enforcement infractions as per our bylaws, then we would have that opportunity. So all of the residents, just like any other process, would have the ability to put in any concerns through Service Regina, and we would go through the process of an investigation. Thank you.
Your worship, just a quick brief comment. I can see that how the neighborhood is behaving itself, and I can see that the condo association and the residents in that area already have a good rapport with you. I feel comfortable about that. It's just they want it to be heard, and they want to have some kind of assurance that if they come to the city or come to you, that there's not going to be a closed door. Otherwise, they're saying they don't want to stand in the way of business. They want to see the city grow, but at the same time, they would like to enjoy their neighborhood. And so their biggest issue for them right now is the back alley. Well, we will deal with that later on. So, Your Worship, thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Ferndale. Other speakers to the report before I call the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Move on to Rosewood Park Concept Plan. We have a couple of delegations. Stephen Onda. Good evening and welcome to City Council. If you could identify yourself for the record and who you represent, you have 5 minutes for your presentation as well.
Thank you, sir. Mayor, councillors, say amen. My name is Stephen Onda. I'm a builder of attainable, affordable housing, alternative housing. I just heard this comment recently, and it seems to be legit. Private sector social housing provider. My interest to present to the council is in support of the Rosewood Concept Plan. This is a little subdivision that could, might, would, will, with your good support. It is a small subdivision that's nestled in amongst something larger called Coopertown, with one of our bigger developers, Dream. And Dream has indicated in the past, and have, with my own personal experience, worked in dispersed populations so that they're not solely high-end housing, not solely townhouses, that there is a mix of housing forms, and Rosewood has embraced that. And I did have a presentation here, but it's been logged into your binders, and so I won't take much of your time. I'd just like to resoundingly speak in favor of the Rosewood Concept Plan.
Thank you very much. There are questions. Councillor Ferndale.
Thank you, Worship. Good to see you.
Okay, John.
What drives that passion in you about the attainable housing and to look after the not so fortunate out there?
It might be because I come from a not so fortunate background, perhaps, even though I'm a white male, middle age. I don't know how 60 got to be middle, by the way. But anyway, because I've seen the struggles of people And I clearly embrace the idea that safe housing provides healthy families, which indeed further makes a healthy community.
And to your worship, and I know that you invest some of your own cash into this.
Yes, I hope I can still pay for my youngest daughter's college after all said and done. But yes, indeed, no, I talk the talk, but I try and walk the walk as well.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Findera. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. Through your worship, could you please define attainable affordable housing?
There are several definitions, of course. I'm sure you're aware. One is they're often mathematical. So no more than 33% of your total gross income before tax could go to your house. It's a gray area because we're defining whether that includes your utilities and your taxes. It often refers purely to the mortgage payment. Another affordable attainable is if it's less than the average of similar housing structure. And the third that I've encountered, this one's a bit more dicey, and I don't think this is quite the Rosewood model. This is the model of some of my projects, is looking at total shelter allowance and calculating shelter allowance and cost of living, groceries, and personal needs.
So maybe I'll ask it differently. How are you defining for this project what attainable affordable housing is?
In the project I'm anticipating for Rosewood, which we have yet to even do anything more than talk about, is we are looking at the first two. So it'll be 1/3 of total gross income and less than similar comparable housing form.
Through you, your worship, are you also including utilities and taxes then, or not?
The model currently is something called warm rent. So the heat costs are included, but the cable TV and internet is not. The current project I'm working on right now with the advent of new digital technologies is that we're trying to include all the telecommunications and internet access. Electricity is not huge in these are multiple dwelling undertakings. So they're generally small because we're talking about affordable, so they are not palatial units. And because of LED lighting and communal laundry, the only thing that in the utility spectrum would be electricity.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Councillor Brasciani.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for doing the work you do, Ms. Rhonda. So I just have a couple questions. You mentioned the rapid and unregulated growth of the housing costs, rental and owned, in your presentation in Regina since 2006. So how will the concept plan mitigate this?
Firstly, I'd like to forewarn that statistics are a marvelous thing that can be manipulated. So we've had a extreme acceleration of costs, but we had very low costs before. And actually we had very dated housing. So if we look at the last 10 years, this increase of whatever it is, 137% or 140%, is astronomical. So part of that is just to get your attention. Yeah. Okay. So how Rosewood is stepping out is that they're looking at, and like most of the subdivisions that we see in our city, that there's a diverse zoning strategy. So there's everything from upper end single lot, single dwellings to larger multiples. And I know that the folks in charge of helping develop this project, Rosewood itself, and of course Troika, have been very conscious of not placing a lot of these upper high density multiples close to Courtney. So I think the mitigation comes with the ability to allow extremely high density. Because it is part of Coopertown, I'll use this example. Myself and Dream just finished a project for 48 townhouses, and the city of Min were very kind in allowing us to increase the density. So we almost doubled the density, but we're able to provide 48 three-bedroom townhomes. So working with the city, which I think Rosewood has demonstrated and Troika has demonstrated, and having some high-density stuff on the west side of the subdivision, and moving through lower density, that a balance will be struck. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, good. And through your worship, just one more question. So again, as someone who builds affordable housing, so that, I guess within the city, how does Rosewood contribute to the infill targets then? How would this development do that?
I'm sorry.
To the infill targets that we've got, how would this development meet that?
Well, it's Rosewood would be the absolute counter to infill. What's interesting is it is in that northwest, which is upperly mobile. So I don't know if it really can be seen as contributing to infill. In fact, you could argue that it's taking away from infill because it's allowing further growth. I'm going to digress.
Okay.
I know there's a recent new infill policy, and I joked when I read it. I said, it looks like someone drove through Lakeview and made suggestions as to the height of the foundations and the steps. I spoke to one of the consultants by accident, discovered he drove through Lakeview and measured the heights of the steps. So infill is a diverse subject. There's infill in our middle income areas, and there's infill in our less desirable areas. So actually, I'm in conversation with a group of nonprofits that are interested in the Rosewood and moving possibly beyond the infill approach. Their hesitation has always been, will our tenants feel comfortable here? We don't want to be they don't want to be surrounded by $500,000 homes. They're living in $275,000 homes. So again, I think the diversity of the zoning suggested in the concept plan will help facilitate undertaking. I don't think we'll ever get away from infill activity. There are many reasons for it. We are working in the inner city now. There's a purposeful reason for that. One, and it's not the cost of the land, by the way, or the cost of development. It's actually more expensive to work down there. But we're close to detox. We're close to addiction counseling. We're close to Regina Capel, mental health, so on and so forth.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, and thank you again for the work that you do.
Thank you for your support.
Other questions of the speaker? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and we'll move on to our next delegation, Jason Petunia, Rich Throfall, and Renee Waslick. Hope I've got those names correct. If you could identify yourself for the record, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Great. Thank you, Your Worship, City Councillors, and City staff. We stand before you on behalf of Rosewood Park Alliance Church and Troika Management Corp. regarding the recommendation for approval of the Rosewood Park Concept Plan. Beside me, I have Jason Petunia from SVN, Richard Threlfall from Troika as our VP of Development, and my name is Renee Wasilic, and I am the CEO of Troika Management Corp. While this is Troika's first introduction to Regina, for the last 20 years, we've been working on over 1 million square feet of residential, commercial, multi-use large land masses in 3 other provinces and 8 municipalities. We were introduced to Rosewood almost 2 years ago and were compelled by the vision that they had and the vision that you as council and mayor for Regina. We jumped in to help and believe that what you see before you today is the culmination of collaboration with the community, a listening ear to all of the stakeholders involved, and bringing to reality the vision that started many years ago. In 1983, in moving to its current location, the church first established its vision for a new community in Northwest Regina. The concept plan before you today is the result of dedicated effort by the church, its partners, and the city, including this council, to make this vision happen. And it's a compelling vision. It's a conventional marketplace housing that is attainable for families, seniors, and new immigrants. It's access to recreation, education, and community-based facilities and services. It's a community where the intergenerational needs of its residents are met and accounted for. Councillors, we have differentiated ourselves in our ability to listen and collaborate with stakeholders, whether it's with the province in meeting critical deadlines necessary to service the school site, or with Maple Ridge residents with whom we worked closely through final revisions of the concept plan to address their concerns, but still keep the compelling vision alive. We now need to turn our attention to putting houses in the ground in 2018 to work with our lenders, consultants, and builder group in bringing the development to market in a manner that is financially feasible while meeting the needs of the community. Our work in this regard is done in lockstep with the city and through ongoing collaboration with our fellow landowners in Coopertown. We are more than ready to continue working with council, administration, and our neighbours to realize the vision that's set forth for Rosewood and to bring our first residential phase to market. And we look forward tonight to support. Thank you, and we're available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for your presentation. There are questions. We'll start with Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. Evening to all of you. Welcome. There are two things I'd like to kind of talk through with you. First of all, there's an amendment, talks about density, and then there's the concept plan. So let's talk first about public engagement. Some folks that weren't so thrilled with where high density was in terms of them. And please tell me how you handled that.
Okay, I'm going to refer that to Jason and to Rich.
Okay. Through you, Your Worship. Yeah, we initially submitted our. Is the mic working here?
Yeah.
It's working.
We initially submitted our concept plan in August, and through the public open house, we received a lot of feedback from neighbors regarding some of the density and land use types along Courtney. Through the city-run process and through that open house, we are able to then come up with a strategy for continued outreach with those neighbors, and we did that up until actually the RPC meeting held in November. So we held 2 sessions with the Maple Ridge neighbors specifically, where we opened up our doors to invited them in to hear their concerns, gave them a presentation of the concept plan, and really were there to listen to what they had to tell us. Through that exercise, we then went back to them with a response before RPC to indicate our willingness to change the land use to accommodate their concerns.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, so I'm going to be a little bit leading in this. So at Planning Commission, there were some nice ladies here who came, and they said some things about you. In other words, thanked you for listening. And they said the same thing about the city of Regina. In particular, Mr. Fenton is here. He was singled out. And by that I mean, not only did you listen, but you communicated back. Would that be a fair statement, Mr. Petrino?
Most definitely. I think they said that was the first time they had seen a developer change their course of action based on community concerns.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. And I think they not only endorsed the Rosewood plan, but they endorsed Coopertown because they saw the alignment there. So I'll leave the change in terms of density. And if I could, I'll just talk about or ask about the concept plan a little bit. So I think publicly one of the things in addition to housing, but I'll step aside from the housing, is the notion of a community that might have seniors care and recreation as part of that. Could you, one, talk about that inclusion, and two, how you see that rolling out and when, please?
Well, I'll start with that, and I'll allow the gentleman to add as they see fit. We specifically created a flex zone, which is one district on the plan. It's on the southwest. I pointed the right way. On the southwest section. And we did that very specifically so that we could involve a lot of different modes of housing as well as a complex that would allow us to create an amenity for all of the residents, not just specifically for seniors, but for all of the residents to enjoy. We've already been contacting seniors nonprofit housing as well as profit housing, so for market housing types to really create a mixture of housing modes and types in that area, but specific to seniors and across right from the school district. So it definitely will create a comprehensive community in that particular area. Do you gentlemen want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just to add to that, in terms of the location of the seniors in that flex area, we really are strong advocates of the notion of having the seniors across from the elementary school and serving as a bridge to the recreation facility in the southwest. So we see that as a real nucleus for the hub of the community, what we've always referred to as a social hub.
Good, thank you for that.
Just one further note on the changing of the density, and it's really a changing of location of density. We did end up lowering it slightly, but still far above what we were required in terms of an average of 50. We're actually hitting the 69 on the gross. And we did that very strategically, and we wanted to keep the high density to make sure that we kept that attainability within the entirety of the community. So we didn't want to lose any of that ability, but still wanted to respect the neighborhood and really find a workable solution that respected what they were saying.
Thanks for that clarity, Mr. Mayor. Again, I'm referring back a little bit to previous discussion, in particular Planning Commission and so on, and I'd like you just to be able to have a chance to clarify. So the recreation facility was suggested as being private, but public opening. So could you speak to that concept of what may be there and how that would work? In other words, maybe owned privately, but can I come in? That type of thing.
Well, the Y is a great example of a privately run facility that's publicly accessible. We've had many vision conversations with Rosewood Park Alliance Church and how they see this rolling out. We definitely are in the infancy stages of figuring out what that looks like. We have some concept plans and definitely have some vision for where we want to see that go. And we'll probably roll it out in phases so that it has the right amount of community surrounding it to make sure that it's viable at all times. But it will be a collaboration between profit and profit so that we can make sure that it does remain accessible to those that want to use it within the community.
Good, thanks for that. I have to mention servicing. I think Mr. Bertrina would be disappointed if I didn't say this.
Definitely.
So the way the report reads is not the usual way that we receive a report. It's kind of not as clearly defined and so on. So I would make a statement and ask you to respond if you don't mind. It would be probably the view of the administration and council that whenever there is servicing involved, that in fact the city understands but also agrees to it, and it is not subsidized by the community. So there's my opening salvo just to make sure that we're clear about servicing. If you could comment for me, please.
Yeah, as you know, there's been quite a few rounds of discussion for this council on servicing of the Rosewood Park community. And I'd just like to say that we've had some really great collaboration with administration, especially over the last year or so, in terms of reaching a common understanding of what the servicing needs are of the community and with our neighbor as well, with Dreams. So I think between the three parties involved, we're making a lot of headway on determining a regional servicing strategy that's to the benefit of everybody.
Good. So I appreciate that. And Mr. Mayor, you've alluded to the overall concept of Coopertown and how you are working together. And so I heard that assurance. Thank you very much. My last one is also about clarity, if you don't mind. Oftentimes when people see development, they know the road will get bigger, stronger, and faster immediately, probably before a house even goes up. Could you just talk about when, from your point of view, the notion of Courtney may change? And that's kind of a question I will ask the administration as well. But
okay, Rich, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. Excuse me. The upgrades to Courtney Street will be based on discussions as we move into servicing agreements for each phase, and it will depend on the requirements that are identified through the traffic studies. So we don't have that lined up exactly to date, but as noted in the Coopertown Neighborhood Plan, it is required to be improved by the developer as each phase of development proceeds adjacent to that section of roadway.
Thank you. So if I could just finish, would it be fair to say houses have to be built and buildings have to be built and fees have to be paid kind of after that happens, not before? Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, that would be a fair statement. In the next 6 months, we'll be moving through the rezoning and servicing agreement phase for that very first phase. So we'll be setting up the plan in its entirety at that point.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. Councillor Berchiani.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, thank you for coming forward tonight. And I have to say I'm very excited that it is here. Finally, we've been working for at least a year, anyway, talking about Rosewood. And the plan that is before us, the concept plan, looks very good. And thank you for having the different mixed densities. That is wonderful. With seniors and across from schools. Now, there is one thing that I know I had a call in regards to the parks. So maybe can you just respond as to why there's not more park space, in this, in Rosewood?
Yep. Well, we actually are over-dedicated. The entirety of the school site and park site that's right next to it actually exceeds our dedication amount. Now, we have been working with city staff to make sure that some of our utility corridors could also be twinned as parks and have a duplicate use. And so we're still working through some of that with them and are hopeful. But in order to connect some of these larger park sites that we actually have a corridor that connects all of them, right from Courtney Street all the way through to the Coopertown, and that would go through our park site as well. So it's an actual beautiful trail site that will go all the way through. And then additionally, we've got little trails that connect all the way through so that people don't have to be using streets to get to those major parks that are in our subdivision.
Perfect. That's great. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Berchiani. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Your Worship. So thank you very much for your presentation. Just for a little bit of clarity, where is Troika headquartered as a development company?
We are headquartered in Kelowna, British Columbia.
Perfect.
Yep.
So Kelowna, 2 provinces over, there's a lot of municipalities between the Okanagan and us. What you sort of alluded to it, but what else brought you to this development in particular?
Well, we've had developments in Winnipeg, in Edmonton, and Kelowna for the last 12 years. We've been in the Okanagan for the last 20. So we had this missing link of Saskatchewan. We actually had to fly over Saskatchewan every time to get to our Winnipeg developments. And it definitely was one that we had our eye on. But for us, we're not a developer who just goes and randomly buys tracts of land. We have something that does have a compelling vision, something that we believe in, something that we believe aligns with the vision of the municipality as well, because we are, our vision statement is building sustainable communities. And that doesn't just mean bricks and mortar, it actually means the surrounding area as well. So for us to partner with someone like Rosewood Park Alliance Church, who already has a really great impact in its community, is a great way for us to establish ourselves and really get up and running. The other thing is that we do need larger land masses to get that critical scale. And for us, this was the perfect project in terms of its scale, in terms of its vision, and in terms of what we wanted to do in the long term. So we don't see ourselves as short term, here today, gone tomorrow. In fact, this is a 30-year project that we'll be contributing towards for the next while.
Perfect. No, it's great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Murray.
Thank you for the question.
Other questions? Thank you very much for answering the questions. You can return to the gallery, and we'll deal with a couple of communications. The first one is from residents to the congregation. This is CP 17-32, and we have also from the City of Regina a communication 17-33. Have a motion to accept those, please. Councillor O'Donnell, seconder, please. Okay, Councillor Young, any discussion on either one of those two? Councillor O'Donnell.
I just want to highlight, I asked the the proponents to highlight this, but it was really a nice moment to be in council chambers at Planning Commission, to have residents come forward and acknowledge the process that not only the developer went through, the church went through, but that our city staff went through. And I think some of you, I'm not sure if all of you did, but some of you would have got post communication from some of those residents thanking them, all of those people, for what a good job they did of bringing people together. And so really what's here, this change, is as a result of public engagement done really well. I just wanted to highlight that, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. I also want to just mention as well that the names are on file for at the clerk's office related to recommendation number, letter number 32. I'll call a question on the communications. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Now we'll move to the report itself. This is CR 17-132. It is the proposed Rosewood Park concept plan. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. If I could have a seconder, please.
Seconder, please. Okay. Councillor Massanelli.
Thanks very much. So I asked the delegation to speak a lot to what's here, and I'll just highlight a few things. One is that some of you, most of you, if not all of you, would have seen some of this information previously in terms of the type of housing, variety of housing, neighborhood concept plan, the idea that both seniors care, a school, and a recreation would all be part and parcel of this. And of course, that speaks to many elements not only of our official community plan, but what is really a desirable neighborhood. I wanted to make sure, and they did it very well, to talk about, for example, the recreation concept of maybe being privately owned, but also being open to the public, because that's not always the way it is in the city. And I think as well, I heard a couple of things. One, they want to start building in 2018. That's good to hear, but also that there's already been some work done in terms of attaining and bringing in seniors care, or structured living and so on for people of the older category. Lots of different terms there. In other words, it's a demand area, and to have that coming in real quick with the little kids, think about it for a minute. We've sat here before and listened to where somebody wants to build a seniors care home and put a school and a daycare in it. Holy cow, that's not the way it used to be. But isn't that what's called bringing life? So now this is an extension of bringing life to a larger community. I identified this, and I want to make sure that we're clear. There is some room for negotiation, I guess, yet, but certainly for agreement when it comes to the servicing. And from my point of view, Council has been very clear about we don't, as a community, subsidize development, and that's foundational here. You heard the acknowledgement, and we did that at Planning Commission as well. That's very important to me. But I really like the idea that, one, the landowner here and the landowner in Coopertown is working together, and two, the neighbors. This is what the neighbors finished by saying. We not only endorse what's going on in Rosewood, we not only endorse what's going on in Coopertown, but we really like this area of the city. So we would seek concurrence on this, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers to the report? Councillor Bryce, could you take the chair, please?
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Who says Regina isn't growing? We see a lot of these reports coming forward through Planning Commission of growth in Northwest Southeast. This report, this project is a long time coming, and I just briefly want to say that I appreciate the work being done by Rosewood Alliance Church and the consultant and other representatives here tonight. It is a welcome development that has taken some time to go forward, but just to emphasize what Councillor O'Donnell was saying, what's particularly important is the collaboration with the community. And I noted in the discussion at Planning Commission, an amendment has been made based upon public consultation. There was no issue with respect to how that change went forward, and I think that's excellent news. This is what we've been hearing all along in this development. A lot of collaboration with the community. When you come down to the concept plan, which you want to see, then you get into the granular discussion of what density will happen. So I appreciate the delegation moving forward with a change and fully support this project. It is long overdue when you speak about seniors, their recreation amenities, which I think is unique to this part of the city. The example is used is the YMCA, which is typically what you see as a private ownership but open to the public. But I also, if I understood correctly from Mr. Bertuni, I'll talk about this will be done in a way that will make it affordable for those living in the area. It is not meant to make it too expensive to be used. That's critical for public accessibility and breaking down barriers for those who live there and those who are in the area to use it. So I'm fully supportive of this project, and I can't wait to see a shovel in the ground and see how it go up as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see no other speakers, so I'm going to call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll now move on to next report. This is actually the mayor's report. I'm going to ask Councillor Bryce to take the chair once more.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Madam Chair, this is my report with respect to the recent Big City Mayor's Caucus meeting in Toronto on November 30th. If I can have a seconder for the report, please. It is simply receive and file. Seconder, please.
Councillor Fundura.
Madam Chair, I'm not going to go through the entire report, just to highlight a few things that we had a different kind of meeting in Toronto in November. This related primarily to a discussion of where do we see our cities going in the future. And in the discussion section of page 2 frames the discussion, what will tomorrow's cities look like, and what's happening internationally, what new technologies are coming to life. And I note that Councillor Dowell has a motion coming up later tonight that speaks to the issue of this we spent a lot of time talking about, which is autonomous vehicles and what cities would look like in the future, what kind of partnerships would happen and to make that happen. So his motion's quite timely. We also talked a lot about the diversity and prosperity of cities, and the theme being city building is nation building was the theme. And Richard Florida, I think we all know and understand, is a real forward-thinking individual with respect to cities and how things go forward there. We talked a lot about the disparity of income, disparity of uneven growth within cities, and how we can begin to have those discussions. Nothing resolved, of course, at the conference itself, but to hear some of his leading-edge ideas was quite interesting. Ted Graham from General Motors and Dave Bullock from Intelligent Transportation Systems in Emoji Vision talked about autonomous vehicles. That's in the report as well. Interesting that Mr. Graham talked about GM having these vehicles available as early as 2019, which I think is quite surprising to most mayors that were there. But we also talked as well, Madam Chair, about infrastructure fund, national housing strategy, cannabis legislation, and the opioid crisis, which affects every city in so many ways. And finally, a discussion from Jan De Silva, Chair of the Canadian Global Cities Council, Christopher Shepard, and Zachary Tofias with respect to planning and development, about just how we are responding to climate change across Canada, but also speaking related to alternate sources of revenue for cities to be able to meet the challenges of the future. That's not uncommon to what we see today in Regina and other Western Canadian cities. The report speaks to several different ideas, acknowledging, of course, that many of these changes are legislation by nature for change and not being able to be done unilaterally by municipalities, but the discussion is happening nationally as well. So the next report we'll have, or next meeting we have, I should say, will be in Ottawa on February 15th, and that will be back to the traditional lobbying federal government for its pre-budget consultations. But this report was different. This meeting was different because it talked about visioning, where do we see cities going in the future, and are we ready and prepared to move forward in that regard. So I appreciate the opportunity to report back to Council on this report, and we'll answer any questions that anybody has on the report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for the detailed report. One of the challenges, as the Mayor has mentioned, is finding alternate sources of funding for the cities. Much funding that comes from the federal government flows through the provinces, and often there's a difficulty having it flow from the province down to the cities and municipalities. Is there any discussion of that kind of issue? Any indication, for example, with the cannabis legislation, where there's an agreement for 75% to go to the provinces, but nothing further with respect to flowing down to the cities? I'm wondering if there's any connection there for funding flowing directly to the cities.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. There was a much higher level discussion of the need for new tools to provide resources to cities. And there was no detail as to the mechanism within which that money is dispersed. There are the integrated bilateral agreements between the federal government and the provinces, particularly for infrastructure. So no details other than to say that they understand the pain municipalities go through with, we have a 17th century tax system and 21st century demand, and they understand all that. They meaning the presenters that were there. But beyond that, discussion on cannabis. We know that the federal government and provinces agreed to the 75-25 split. That's all public record. But I can tell you through FCM and through Big City Mayor's Caucus, the federal government has not directed, has not made it a condition of disbursement, but urged the provinces to disperse money to municipalities. So FCM and Big City Mayor's Caucus has said 33% of all revenue should go to municipalities for cannabis legalization, because we speak in terms of training for the police officers, the roadside checks, the equipment for that, everything from licensing and zoning for municipalities, and there's several different units of administration that are involved in this activity. But no direct, as far as I understand, no direct compulsion or requirement of disbursement monies to have it go to municipalities. Unless it's in part of a larger agreement of disbursement of infrastructure, that's where we sit today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very helpful.
Any further questions? Seeing none?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'll call the question on the report, which is received and filed. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. Now I'll move to administration reports. This is the CM 17-13, the 2018 utility operating and 2018-2022 capital budget. A motion for that, please. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. I'll move 17-13, which is the 2018 operating and 2018 to 2022 capital budget. Do you want me to read the recommendations?
Please do.
Okay, thank you. That the 2018 fee-supported utility operating budget with total revenues of $132,820,000 and total gross expenditures of $76,119,300, a transfer to the reserve of $49,222,111, and the debt repayment of $7,478,589 be approved. Number two, that the 2018 to 2022 capital budget with gross expenditures of $56,288,000 in 2018 be summarized in City of Regina 2018 utility budget as attached in Appendix A be approved. And number three, that the utility capital budget for the multi-year tax-supported capital projects underway in 2018 with gross expenditures of $15,600,000 be approved as follows: 2018, $7.5 million, 2019, $8.1 million. Number four, that the 2018 water, wastewater, and storm drainage rates reflecting an overall of 2% rate increase for effective January 1st, 2018, as described in the City of Regina 2018 budget, utility budget as attached in Appendix A, be approved. And number five, that the city solicitor authorized to prepare all necessary bylaw and implements for the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. A second for the report, please. Councillor Hawkins. To the administration, any opening comments with respect to this report? This is the first stage of our budget for 2018. Mr. Lacey, do you have any comments?
Through your worship. The utility operating capital budget before you today for approval. Just maybe a couple of quick comments. Rates for water, wastewater, and drainage services are designed to cover the full cost required to provide the service. This includes both daily operating costs and the costs of infrastructure renewal. As mentioned, administration is recommending an over 1% rate increase in the 2018 utility budget, and this is the lowest rate increase in a decade that has been brought forward by administration. And the recommended increase for an average residential household is about $2.70 increase a month. And with that, I will conclude my comments and take any questions. Thank you.
There are questions. Thank you, Mr. Lacey. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Pretty dry year in the last year. I'm wondering how many water main breaks we had.
Ms. Casemo, you know that right off the top of your head, don't you?
I do admit I have to look it up. Through your worship, we've had 372 water main breaks in 2017. As a comparison, our previous record was 341 water main breaks in 2003.
I'm sorry, 2003. So we had, just so I understand, we had a couple of years of pretty wet conditions and so on. Did we get water main breaks during those years as well in, I'll say numbers, maybe not this high, but does it not work the same?
Through your worship, I don't believe we had nearly as many, but I'll have Ms. Wilson see if she can provide you some information on what happens in wet weather.
Thanks.
Ms. Wilson.
Through you, your worship. The numbers are considerably lower in a wet year. We get high numbers of main breaks during very dry seasons towards the end of the season, so typically we would see them in September. This year they started in July and ramped up through September. We also get them in extremely cold weather, so we had a very high number, I believe it was 2015, we had a very cold winter, and we had very high numbers then. The numbers can be much, much lower. So for main breaks, it can be 10 times. This year was about 10 times as many as a low year, and certainly more than double an average year.
Good, thanks for that. So the vast majority of water main breaks occur on city property. In other words, they're covered by this utility cover here. So if I'm correct, then residents don't pay in addition for that. So if it happens in front of my house on city property, I don't pay. Is that fair?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, that's correct. The repair for the water main breaks were done within the existing budget.
Good. So within this budget, you've accounted for the fact that maybe next year we'll have water main breaks, and I don't have to worry about that. Is that fair?
Through your worship, that's correct.
Good. So when we had some of those really wet conditions, flooding was always one of those things that people talked about. So within this budget, is there things done to mitigate flooding? And specifically, I'm looking at these beautiful, in many cases, parks, but seem to be kind of low in the ground that'll accept water and so on. So could you just give me an idea? Is that part of the budget process? Is that an annual thing? And in fact, in the last few years, have we done anything to, I don't know, mitigate flood? Not that it's current, but maybe.
Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, yes, drainage is part of the rate that is paid through the utility. There are drainage projects that we have each year in the budget process. We have a number of them, again, in 2018. I can have Ms. Wilson just talk about a few of the past projects that we've done and some examples of that, and perhaps talk about the projects that are planned for 2018.
Great, thanks.
Ms. Wilson?
Through you, your worship, I can speak a little bit, and Mr. Doney may have some additional information. Over the last few years, the biggest projects have been the new detention pond on Parliament Avenue, just by the Louvain. And right now we're continuing to work on a project on Arcola Avenue, which ties in neighborhoods both to the north and to the south and west. As well, we have work going on at 5th Avenue North, crossing Albert Street, where we are addressing a shortfall in that neighborhood. So there is always some work that is planned. Typically, we work neighborhood by neighborhood for drainage, whereas wastewater and water projects tend to be more system-wide.
Good, thanks. So if I could just switch gears a little bit. We've talked a lot about development in the east in particular, and we talk a little bit about water pressure and so on. Can you give me a little update on water pressure at currently and what's the foreseeable future? Because again, we had another development come before us.
Ms. Gizmo?
Your worship, I'll have Ms. Wilson or Mr. Doney try to respond to that.
Through your worship, through the preliminary work that we've done through the water master plan, we know that we need to do upgrades for the city to improve our water pressure, and so there is planned work that will begin design in 2018, and construction will begin 2022 timeframe to upgrade our water system, and so that includes a new pump station, a new reservoir, and new large diameter pipes.
So as part of the budget process where we're kind of putting money away for those projects, could you describe that for me if you don't mind?
Ms. Gizmo?
Your Worship, we base our budget on a 25-year model where we look at these large expenditures over the next 25 years. And then through that model, we look at the reserve balances and what's required to fund those projects. And that's what we've done to reach the recommended rate increase for this year.
Good. So the last kind of question, I'll make my final comment. So we've talked a little bit about the water utility, electrical, and all that kind of stuff. We have 2 pipes that run. We're different than other places because we have 2 pipes that run between that plant and Regina, so we always have that source. Other cities don't necessarily do those types of things. So kind of where are we at with the water plant in terms of this budget, specifically to this budget? Are we putting any money away for future development, or is that because it's now an entity unto itself that we look at that differently, if you don't mind?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, there is a couple projects still to be done to support the Buffalo Pound treatment plant in here. Mostly the future improvements to the plant will be under the new governance structure.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Doney talk about some of the work that we're completing with Buffalo Pound under the former structure.
Thanks very much.
Mr. Doney, go ahead.
Through you, Your Worship, there is a budget request in 2018 to do some electrical work at the Buffalo Pound water treatment plant, and so that is proposed to begin in 2018. The rest of the projects will be handled, as Ms. Gasmo mentioned, through the new governance, but we are doing a lot of work on the pipes from here to Buffalo Pound. So we need to inspect those and determine if they need to be rehabbed to ensure that we have reliable service.
Okay, good, thanks. So my last comment is simply this. One, I get calls from residents always about servicing in terms of I have a water main break, or what about? I have just a ton of confidence in the fact that we have attacked many areas over these last few years, and you've been very reasonable about the increase. You have my support on this, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Brashani.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I just have a couple questions just in regards to some of the extra charges or extra fees. So if you can just explain, elaborate the access fee.
Mr. Lacey?
Through your worship, under the access fee, I would typically categorize it as 2 components. There's the indirect component that relates to covering costs related to the administration of the utility. So that would be council proceedings, city manager's office, my office, executive director of corporate services, HR, and IT. And that fee, that administration fee, has been calculated as 5% of the utility budget's revenue from the previous year. So this is a consistent formula that has been used for a number of years with respect to calculate that amount. And then the second piece to that is direct charges. So that would be things, for example, the utility using city vehicles, equipment, etc.
Thank you for that. Through your worship. Also, so is that including the utility administration charge? Is that something different than the access fee?
Mr. Lacey?
Through your worship. So with respect to the intermunicipal transfers, there's actually 2 types of fees. So the fee that I just described relates to the administration fee. And then there's a second fee, which is called a access fee. And the intent of the access fee is to, I guess, to recognize in the costing model for the utility the equivalent, if that utility is run through a third party, the equivalent of what they would have to pay in property taxes with respect to the utilities. Or another way to look at that would be with respect to access fees that a third-party utility would pay with respect to rights to use and access civic assets. So it's intended to recognize, as I mentioned, it's kind of a full cost recovery model. So it's intended to recognize those costs as well that a utility, excuse me, would incur.
Thank you. One more question to you, Worship. So are those then the professional fees that you just explained, or are the professional fees something different?
Mr. Lacey?
Through your worship, I believe the professional fees you're referring to are a line item in the budget, and I will refer that question to Ms. Schultz. Thank you.
Ms. Schultz?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, the professional fees are separate and different from the fees that were just described by Mr. Lacey, and they would include things such as consultants doing work for us that we would charge to that professional services line within the budget.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And one more question, Your Worship. So they run about 50% of the wages and benefits that cost each year, but they're going up 9.8 this year. So is there, I guess, number one, why? And is this something that can be done in-house?
Who wants to try that one? Mr. Lacey?
Through your worship, I will refer this question to Ms. Wilson.
Ms. Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship, a large portion of that is actually just a reallocation of a fee. We had previously had a substantial amount of budget that was under equipment rental, but that equipment actually comes with a driver. So for situations where we don't have sufficient vehicles, we have a contract where they come and provide that service. And there was a move of budget. So you will see a reduction, I believe, in goods and services or in other expenses. In other expenses. And that largely offsets that increase in the professional services. So it's simply a categorization change for the bulk of that.
Okay, good. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Bashani. Councillor Young.
Thank you, and through your worship, for people who may be listening or who don't know why, we are going to be voting on this budget this evening separate from the city operating capital budget. So would someone explain why this stands alone or is not a part of the larger budget?
Mr. Lacey.
Through your worship, the utility budget and the general fund budget are being separated this year. The utility budget, we were ready to go for it, go forward with it as administration. And so it does stand alone. It can stand alone and apart because it is user-funded full pay. With respect to the general fund budget, some of the challenges with the reduction in funding from the province last year have resulted in added complexities in finalizing the development of the 2018 general fund budget, as well as we push later into this calendar year, we can get a better sense perhaps of where the province might be going in 2018. Having said that, we do expect to shortly in the new year be able to publicly release a proposed general fund budget shortly in the new year.
Thank you. Through your worship, we did receive a letter from one person this evening, so I'm going to ask a couple of questions that were posed in that letter. And one is, how do we renew our reserves? And if we're spending them, are they going to disappear and we're not going to have any reserves? So how do we renew that so that we can take it to the future?
Mr. Lacey?
Through your worship, so in this year's budget, when we look at the 25-year funding model, as part of that, there is an assessment of a projection of how much we should transfer to reserves. So as part of this year's budget request, we are recommending $49.2 million be moved to the reserves. In the report, we have a 5-year capital plan where our reserves are drawn down upon. However, While the reserves will be less than that they are today, they are still within the recommended range of the utility reserve fund. And so we're confident that as we move forward, we will have the funding necessary to undertake the necessary capital investment in the utility infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. And one last question through you, Your Worship. One of the questions that was posed in this letter is water conservation. So how do we as a city encourage water conservation?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through Your Worship, we've actually seen with our current rate structure that is based on a base rate and a variable rate that we've actually had a large uptake on water conservation. So, for example, this year being one of our driest years, when we look back on previous years, our water consumption actually was less than in the last previous dry year we had. So we are already seeing conservation, particularly even in our growth of our city. We're using less volume of water than we have in the past. So I think the rate structure does support the conservation activities.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll keep this brief. In that same letter that Councillor Young is referring to, there's a fifth question, and that's around a leak detection system or supposed lack thereof. Would you be able to speak on that, what our current policy is around getting that source water to the end user, and if we can tell if there's a volume reduction along the way?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through Your Worship, I'll have Mr. Doney provide a response to what we do.
Doney, go ahead.
Through you, Your Worship. Inspecting water mains is very challenging compared to sewer mains. However, we do focus on our large diameter water mains to reduce the risk of any large leaks that could occur that would actually have a disruption in service if they were to occur. So we inspect our mains with it's called smart technology to try and determine if there's a leak there. So we focus on those large pipes to reduce any risk of major water main breaks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Flegel.
Nope.
Nope.
Yeah?
You go ahead.
Yeah. We weren't sure who was going to be next. So.
You're on.
Thanks for you. And so of the 347 water main breaks or whatever the number was, what's the average cost? On average. I don't need. I mean, there's a high and a low.
Excuse me. Of course.
Through Your Worship, I'll see if Ms. Wilson has that information available.
Ms. Wilson.
Through Your Worship, I believe that it's about 10,000. It can be less. It can be more if it's on a big street with a lot of infrastructure underneath it. So it depends on how easily we can get at the pipe and how quickly we can fix it.
And out of that, does that money come out of a reserve? Does it come from this fee structure that we're putting into the into this budget? Where does the money come from?
Ms. Wilson.
Through Your Worship, we do have a substantial budget in place for main breaks. We have all different kinds of work that we do, and in some years it's going to be more on the drainage system and the wastewater system. In wet years, in dry years, it may be more on the water system. So there's a little bit of fluctuation there. If we are not able to cover it within the overall budget, then we do draw on the reserve. In this year, we expect that while the water main break budget was overspent, we do believe that we'll be still within budget overall.
Thanks. So thank you. Through you. So in the last 10 years, we've been running about an 8 to 9% increase in the water utility rate. Is it safe to say that of that 8-9%, 2% would have been a normal increase? And what happened to the other 6 or 7%? Where did that go?
Ms. Gizmo?
If you let's just say this: where did the 8% rate increase per year for the last 10 years go?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through Your Worship, each year we look at the model, the 25-year model, and we evaluate the large expenditures coming up. So in the years that we had the 8%, 9%, we were anticipating the work that needed to be done on the wastewater treatment plant. We also anticipated some other large projects that were coming down, and we were able to put ourselves in a very good position to fund those projects or be prepared to pay for those types of projects and prepare ourselves for the future without having to have large increases into the future. So it was really about planning for the future and what the future needs were.
So if I could, just to follow up on that, and this is part of the questioning through you, is that how much money was accumulated to be able to put it towards the wastewater treatment or special projects through the increase? So basically, we were building up a savings account, but what kind of money were we able to write a check for to pay down the wastewater treatment plan of $171 million?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, the past budgets were very much like this budget, where there was expenditures for the current year expenditures. There were planned transfers to the reserve, which I believe this year is around $80 million, and will be drawn down over the next 5 years. So it helped contribute to that as well, and it also gives us the ability for the debt repayment structure that is part of the P3 contract and structure.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's good. I just wanted clarification, because there's a misconception out there that we just kept the money and spent it on willy-nilly things around the city, but we actually basically cut down a debt of $171 million with money we've collected over the last years to not increase our debt limit an extra $65 million or whatever the number is. So that's something that the citizens need to know, because it's not like the money was blown somewhere else. It was put towards an asset that's part of the city that basically the wastewater treatment plant is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 billion of an asset to the city of Regina. What number if we had to rebuild today a complete new wastewater system for what we have today, what would that cost us? $1 billion?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, I'll just first start by commenting that all money brought in through the utility, through utility rates, goes towards paying for the utility service. So whether that is new capital infrastructure or the operating services, it all goes towards that. I'll ask Ms. Wilson if she can comment on what we would expect the value of to replace the wastewater treatment plant would be as a total cost.
Ms. Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship. I anticipate that if we were building it from scratch, it would probably be in the $250 to $300 million range. The thing that is often easy to miss with our system is the value that is in the pipes in the ground. So while the two plants are very large, and they are large single entities that we put a value on, the pipes dwarf the value of that, and they always require replacement as well. We've gone from approximately $2 to $3 million a year going into water, wastewater, and storm drainage pipes, probably in the early 2000s, to closer to 15 or 16 now.
Okay, thank you. One more thing through you is that, is it correct that 80 to 85% of all the dollars spent on wastewater, on water, is underground in piping, mains? Is that a fair statement?
Through your worship, I'll ask Ms. Wilson if she knows that estimate.
Ms. Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship. If you include all of the fixed assets, about 80% of the cost of getting water to you is fixed. About 20% would be pumping and the actual cost of cleaning the water, cleaning the wastewater. So that's a fair assessment if you include all of the pumping stations and so on.
Thank you. Just a general comment on this, and that the utility that we're putting forward at an extra 2% today is basically it's going to cover old, existing, and future going forward. And every time we have a water main break, or every time you see the city services people out there ripping a street apart, it's coming out of this kind of funding. So I've had actually 2 emails. I don't get a lot of emails, but I had 2. And the one guy was absolutely adamant that we should go 0, but he wasn't looking at tomorrow. So I think this is looking at tomorrow. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Schlegel. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have 2 questions. I'll state them right at the beginning. First of all, do we know what percentage of water we lose through leakage in the system? And secondly, when we replace water main breaks, when we replace pipes, Is the technology we're using today in terms of that infrastructure better than the old technology so that we can expect and defend against water main breaks in the future?
Ms. Casmo?
Your Worship, I'll start and then have Mr. Doney. He'll respond to the percentage of water lost through the leaks. I'm not certain of that number, that percentage. I do believe we are using newer technology as we get in and replace new infrastructure, particularly on our wastewater and our drainage systems. We're doing a lot of relining, which is a newer technology, but allows us to get in and rehabilitate the pipes without having to dig up other infrastructure like the roads, and that's certainly causing having a cost savings, but is also providing longer life to the existing infrastructure that's already in place. I'll have Mr. Doney respond to the leaks and anything else about the technology.
Mr. Doney?
Through your worship, approximately the water loss in the city is approximately 20%. In general, we do have very different technology that we use to renew our infrastructure, like Ms. Gasmo spoke about. We also use different materials, so we use a PVC pipe now instead of a concrete pipe, and that does have the ability to withstand some movement in our clay soils.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Massanelli.
Through you, Chair. In one of the answers, it was said that the recommended range of the utility fund reserve, that the amount left over would still be in conjunction with that. When was the last time the recommended range was reviewed, and what's it at?
Mr. Lacey?
To Your Worship, I will ask Ms. Schultz to respond to that reserve question.
Ms. Schultz.
Thank you. Through Your Worship, the administration is currently looking at reserve review, and we're looking at all of the reserves. The one reserve that we have set aside at the moment was the utility until we got all of the principles set up for the rest. So it will be looked at again likely in 2018 to see if the level of our reserves for the utility fit within the principles that we will be looking at and discussing in the future with Council. As we look at that, it's ensuring that we have enough reserves and resources in order to fund the future, as well as looking at what the assets we have and the change in the assets to ensure that we are covering all of the things that are coming down into the future that we know about.
So we may be in current compliance, but depending on the findings of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Massanelli. Councillor Fundura, you're next.
Thank you, Worship. Through you. Talking about zero, the question was posed to me by residents that we've collected an 8 or 9% for several years. And so the question to me, so the residents can hear it, why not zero? What would zero do to us going to the future? I mean, there was a brief question I thought maybe Councillor Flegel was going to ask. What would zero?
Mr. Lacey?
Through Your Worship, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, the utility is a user-pay full cost recovery system that looks at both current operating costs as well as future capital needs. And it's really a balance between sustainability and affordability, affordability being rates today that we believe are reasonable for the ratepayer to pay, but as well affordability with respect to looking at the long term, addressing the infrastructure needs of today, but also looking forward into the future. So if you look at a 0% utility increase, what it means is probably the immediate impact in 2018 is relatively small, but as you move out, it will mean administration having to look at capital infrastructure projects that we're currently planning and whether those need to be deferred or canceled or future rate increases down the road to pay for those capital infrastructure priorities that aren't funded as part of the rate increase being proposed here, or administration would have to look at debt and come back to Council with respect to looking at debt to fund future infrastructure needs.
Thank you for that answer.
Thank you, Councillor from Dura. Councillor Bryce, before I give you the floor to close debate, any other questions? Can you take the chair forward?
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just a couple of questions related to flooding. Now, last summer was very dry, but we did have some flooding some time ago. And we talked to the province about it, building up our capacity to deal with that flooding and McCarthy Boulevard pumping stations, the capacity to move that water through to our sewage system. But also, with respect to, we don't have any excess flow downstream to neighbors downstream. So the question to the administration is, how does this budget begin to address that? I know we've been doing this current year, but what do we see in the future with respect to making our system more robust and able to handle if we do have flooding in the future?
Ms. Gasmo?
Through you, Madam Chair. I will start and then ask Mr. Doney to provide some additional information. In 2017, we completed a significant amount of work on what is called the third force main. That is an additional large diameter pipe that runs from McCarthy Boulevard pumping station to the wastewater treatment plant. And this adds capacity in large storm events for us to pump more wastewater to the plant. In the 2018 budget, there are some additional upgrades to the McCarthy Boulevard pumping station that will help us, again, increase the capacity of the amount of wastewater we can manage. I'll ask Mr. Doney to provide any additional information on those projects or future projects.
Thank you. Mr. Doney?
Through your worship, as Ms. Gasmo had mentioned, we are quite proud to say that we are in the process of building the third force main and will significantly reduce the risk of wastewater bypasses at McCarthy Boulevard pumping station for this summer season coming up. In addition, there is budget in 2018 to look at the pumps and upgrade that pumping station even more in 2018 and beyond. And all the drainage projects that you see before you, the intent is to reduce the risk of flooding and to keep that rainwater out of the wastewater system so that the wastewater system does not become overfilled. And so there's significant upgrades that need to occur, and this budget does start to address those.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you for that, Madam Chair. Just a comment with respect to future projects, not so much in this year that we're considering now, but in the next few years. That is a refurbishing of the Buffalo Pond Water Treatment Plant. We're doing the electrical upgrade, but there's also a view to expand and modernize the current system. So the administration, where are we at with that project?
Ms. Gasmo? Oh.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I'll have Mr. Doney provide an update on what he knows from the Buffalo Pond Water Treatment Plant.
Thank you, Mr. Doney.
Through your worship, there is a project ongoing right now for electrical upgrades. That is part of the commitment that we've made with the City of Moose Jaw, and that work is tendered out and awarded, and it will be completed in 2018 and 2019. There's also a much larger project that's in the planning stages to renew the Buffalo Pond Water Treatment Plant, and that falls to the governance board of the water treatment plant, and that work is ongoing, and is the funding is captured within the rates that you're seeing here.
Thank you for that. Just a final comment, Madam Chair, just to say that we've had lots of comments by the public about the cost of the utility. We've responded to that by saying we'll make this more affordable, but we're still continuing to have a sustainable utility that will deal with issues in the future, both refurbishing existing infrastructure and new infrastructure into the future. So we listened to what people were saying. They were saying they're concerned about that, but we also have the sustainability very much in our radar screen. So I fully support this recommendation, and hopefully we have this passed so we can have rates begin as of January 1st of 2018. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Bryce to close debate.
Yeah. First of all, the communication CP 17-34.
I'll deal with that after. I'll do that after.
Thank you. Just didn't want that to be missed. I have a couple of questions back to the access fee and the administration fee. We used to have what was called a transfer fee. Is that the administration fee? Through you, Mr.
Lacy?
Through you, Your Worship, I will refer that to Ms. Wilson.
Ms. Wilson.
Through you, Your Worship, no, the administration fee has always been called an administration charge. We have previously referred to what is now called the access fee as a transfer to the general fund, or it has had different references, but it does serve fundamentally the same purpose as Mr. Lacey indicated, covering those costs that we would pay if we were a separate entity.
Okay. I'm not a huge fan of, and never have been a huge fan of the transfer type fee or this access fee. I feel we stand up and we say that this utility pays for the utility, but when we do an access fee, that kind of changes things to me. So I'm a little concerned about that, and I've spoken before about the transfer fee. The administration fee, I definitely understand why we have that in place, and I'm in total agreement with that because that's part of the cost of the utility. I understand if we had somebody else running the utility, that would be what the access fee covers, so it's sort of fair to say that we're doing business fairly because we would pay that if somebody else was running that. It's just we're running it, so I feel that the utility should pay for the utility as we say. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. So before we actually, you close debate, but before we actually vote on that, we do have a communication from Mr. Jim Elliott, CP 17-34. If I could have a receive and file motion on that. Councillor Young, seconder. Councillor Hawkins, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And on the main motion, which is on the 2018 utility budget and the 2018-2022 capital budget, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Now move on to executive committee reports. Councillor Bryce, this is Buffalo Pound transfer of assets.
Thank you. I move PM 17-13, which is the 2018 operating
No, we did
utility.
That. We did that.
Sorry.
We're on the 133.
Yep.
Buffalo Pound transfer of assets.
Yep, I've got it now. It's just technology. 17-133, which is the Buffalo Pound transfer of assets. Recommendation from Executive Committee is that the Executive Director of Finance and Corporate Services be delegated the authority to negotiate, finalize, and approve the agreement to transfer assets between the City of Regina, the City of Moose Jaw, and Buffalo Pound Water Treatment Corporation, as well as any ancillary agreements, assignments, or documents needed to complete the transfer of all assets, including lands, leaseholds, interests, and permits. Part B, to obtain consent, approvals, authorizations, or orders from any government authorities required for the assignment of the lease and for the transfer of assets to permit the Buffalo Pound Water Treatment Center to continue operation of the plant. And point number 2, that the city clerk be authorized to execute the agreement, as well as any ancillary agreements or documents prepared by the city solicitor to complete the transfer of assets. So this is just transferring those assets to that that group that is put together.
The new entity. Okay,
thank you.
good.
The new entity, yes.
Seconder for that, please. Councillor O'Donnell. Mr. Lacey, do you have any comments you want to make on this before we open up for discussion by members of council?
Through you, Your Worship, this is just the next step with respect to the full accounting treatment, I guess, of the Buffalo Pound Water Treatment Corporation back in January of 2016. The corporation was formed through a unanimous members agreement between the cities of Regina and the city of Moose Jaw. At that point in time, while it was not part of the UMA, there was consideration that the asset transfer would occur, so we're just completing the next step through this process.
So this is housekeeping, in other words, essentially.
Your Worship, that would be correct.
Councillor O'Donnell, do you have some comments or questions?
Thanks. Question, where's the city of Moose Jaw at? Is this as a partnership?
Mr. Lacey?
Through Your Worship, we understand that this has been in discussion at the City Council, the City of Moose Jaw, and they will be dealing with this item this week as well. And we understand that it's being positively received by the City Council in Moose Jaw, and we don't expect any issues.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other discussions on this report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Bryce, the Global Transportation Hub Authority, ongoing operation and services. The floor is yours.
I'm at a different one than you then. Here we go. 17-134, which is the Global Transportation Hub Authority. Municipal Servicing Agreement for Ongoing Operating Services. The recommendation from Executive Committee is number 1, that the Executive Director of City Planning and Development be authorized to finalize and approve the terms of the Municipal Servicing Agreement for Ongoing Operating Services between the City of Regina and the Global Transportation Hub Authority. And number 2, that the City Clerk be authorized to execute the Municipal Servicing Agreement after review and approval by the City Solicitor. So this is good news for us.
I'll get a seconder for that first, if I could. Seconder for it? Councillor Young, go ahead.
Thank you. This is good news for us. This is talking about the servicing that would happen out at the Global Transportation Hub, and us actually getting reimbursed for those services that we provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Are there other speakers to the report? This is, in fact, very good news. And I'd like to thank the administration, Ms. Harlock, for you and your staff for doing some incredible work to get this resolved in a way that meets our objectives, and also the GTH as well. So congratulations on that work. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next report, Executive Committee, is the Regina Wastewater Treatment Plant Upgrade Project, the project update. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. CR 17-135, as you mentioned. Recommendations are as follows. Number 1, that City Council authorize City Manager or designate to negotiate and enter into an amendment to the agreement to design, build, finance, operate, and maintain for the wastewater treatment plant upgrade project between the City of Regina and EPCOR, and any ancillary documents to the extended period of time to archive the 30-day performance test and final completion. Such negotiation and amendment for the project agreement must require the following. A, EPCOR must achieve the performance standards for the 30-day performance test as currently set out in the project agreement, with only additional time being amended to meet this test. B, that EPCOR must achieve final completion within the time period for the extension for the 30-day performance test. C, that the risk allocation within the project agreement is maintained and that the City does not assume any additional risks because of the extension. And D, EPCOR shall fully compensate the City for the City's additional costs arising out of the extension period.
A seconder for that, please. Councillor Fundura. Discussion on the report. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks. So could we have a little update as to where this is at currently? And maybe a little bit as to what it is.
Mr. Onright.
Through your worship, so the request from administration is to allow administration to negotiate a 30-day, the extension of the 30-day testing. This is part of the requirement through the contractual agreement. And currently, EPCOR is in the testing phase. They will be complete here in the next few days. The reason administration is coming forward to ask for the extension is the independent certifier will not complete their work until into the new year. So our contract currently runs out at the end of December. This will allow time for the independent certifier to do their work certifying whether the test was successful or not, and bring forward the report to administration.
Thanks. I'm going to just elaborate a little bit. At the Executive Committee, one of the gentlemen representing EPCOR came, and I thought he paid us a great compliment. And they own many plants or operate many plants, and he said never before have they been challenged to have peak capacity tested early on in the process. Usually that happens many years later. I think that was a good deal. So I would say, and in his comment, and I'm looking right at him right now, he complimented our staff for the contract that was set up. And in a P3, this was new to us at the time. I thought that was really effective, and kudos to all those folks that are involved. So what it also means for me is that they want to make sure that the plant is operational to that capacity. And if we just simply offer them a little bit more time, they can figure that out. But they also ask for time because if they find a flaw, what they can then do is fix it. And then there's this really interesting thing. We've held back $25 million. I'm going to repeat that. $25 million to make sure that that's okay, and that before the contract is complete or all agreements are there, and by the way, we all operate together for the next, I think it's 30 years, that we're all in good stead. This is a very good news story. I want to thank all those folks involved.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Bryce, or Councillor Young, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Closing debate.
When the wastewater treatment plant first came to us and we first started talking about it, I was fairly new on council, and as you know, we had a referendum about this wastewater treatment plant, and so we had a lot of information about P3s. I did a lot of reading on my own about P3s, and so we were very well versed in what they were like and what made them successful and what made them not successful. And two things stuck with me through all this time that you see when you see a successful P3. The first one is that the contract at the very beginning is comprehensive, and it has all the clauses in it that are needed to not transfer any risk to the city and to take care of anything that might come forward. And we just see one of these right now. And the second thing that made them successful was hiring experts to do the work, people who had done that kind of work and who had a track record for doing the kind of work. So what I see tonight is very, very positive for me, because all the work that was done at the start on the contract and the people we hired to do the work all turned out to be a successful P3 for the city of Regina. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Other speakers to the report? Councillor Bryce, you take the chair just for a moment, please.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just a couple of questions for clarity. This stress test is not putting the plant is not at capacity right now for its ability to process wastewater. Is that correct? So this is very much at the early stages of its development. Is that correct?
Mr. Honore?
Through you, Madam Chair. That is correct. The stress test really will test the plant for future growth. The stress test today has absolutely no impact on the operation, the current operation of the plant, which is meeting all environmental and permits required by the province.
So it's the maximum peak capacity we're speaking of years in the future. So again, this is critical to understand that. And of course, the plant is fully compliant, as Mr. Armite just said, at meeting or exceeding those standards. This process is at no risk to taxpayers at all. And any costing that's involved in this process of this testing is not on the backs of taxpayers. So Councillor Young got to where I wanted to go to some degree, just with respect to a P3 that works well. This one works very, very well because it protects the interests of all parties. EPCOR, who construct it and will now operate and maintain it, and taxpayers in the city of Regina. This is a good deal. Clarity of roles, clarity of responsibility, clarity of risk. Taxpayers should be very pleased with the fact that the administration and EPCOR entered into agreement that actually does what it intends to do, which is to put the risk back on the builder with respect to meeting the requirements on the stress test for maximum capacity in the future. So very, very pleased to see this. We have a long-term relationship with EPCOR, 30 years. We're walking hand in hand in this particular issue here, and we look forward to a wonderful relationship in the future because we have, I think, one of the finest wastewater plants in Canada right now, and we're just working very, very well. So I ask members of council to please approve this report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Bryce, to close debate.
Thank you. There's a number of projects that I've seen on council that are the big projects. And I put this up with one of the top 5 projects. So, and the importance of it is huge to our city. So I'm glad to see that going through the right process in order to have those tests in place so that we can make sure that those capacity for the future is there, that we're on the right track, and I think that's appropriate for us to be talking about this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. No other speakers on the report. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll now move on to citizen and organization appointments of committees. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. I'm going to move 17-136, except for number 7 currently, because we have a conflict with number 7.
Okay, so we will vote for all clauses except clause number 7.
Yes.
Okay,
So
we'll
do you want me to read the names? Or?
No, I think there are quite a few there. So we'll just ask for seconder to the report. Councillor Bresciani, move seconding the report.
Thank you.
Maybe just say what areas or what committees are being filled.
Okay, so this is the 2018 citizen and organization appointments for the committees. Our first one is the Board of Police Commissioners. The second one is the Board of Revision. Third one is the Regina Planning Commission, then the Regina Public Library Board, the Development Appeals Board. Number 6 is the Mayor's Housing Commission. And point number 8 is that members appointed to each board, committee, and commission continue to hold the office for the term indicated for each vacancy or until their successors are appointed.
Thank you for that. Any discussion on the appointments? We're clear we're not voting on recommendation number 7. That one's set aside. All those in favor? Councillor O'Donnell? Sorry. You apologizing first? Okay.
I apologize first. I just would like to note, because we were going to vote very quickly, and thanks to all the folks that actually submit their names and want to serve. And I think people should understand that in all these committees that we had many people to choose from. But second of all, many of them actually have a skill set that they're offering to share for the advancement of our community. And so if we could just add a little thank you to all of those folks.
Appreciate it, Councillor O'Donnell. Thank you for that. On the report, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Bresciani, you want to? You should state the reason why, just for the record.
Yeah, thank you. I have a conflict of interest as my husband is on the school board.
Thank you. Councillor Bryce.
So I will move in the same report. I will move point number 7, which is the representatives for the school boards and the City Council Liaison Committee.
Seconder for that, please. Councillor Young. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll wait for Councillor Bresciani to return. So now we're looking at the 2018 elected official committee appointments. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. CR 17-137, which is the 2018 elected officials committee appointments. There are a couple that we are waiting for till January. Do we have?
We have one that we do for sure.
Finance and admin.
Finance administration. Okay. Okay. Let's get the report on the table then.
I'll put the report. I'll read the recommendations, but I can have a seconder to start with.
Seconder, Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you. Point number 1 is that City Council appoint and approve the elected member appointments to the committees as summarized in Appendix A. Number 2, that all appointments be made effective January 1st, 2018, with the terms of office to December 31st, 2018, unless otherwise noted, and that members appointed continue to hold office for the term indicated or until their successors are appointed.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. We have some other speakers here. Councillor Massanelli. The floor is yours.
Through your chair, I'd like to move an amendment that Councillor Andrew Stevens' name be removed from the list of appointments for the Finance and Administration Committee in Appendix A. Due to percentage.
Okay. Seconder for that, please. Okay, Councillor Murray. So Councillor Stevens removed from Finance Administration. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So there are vacancies, and that's one for Finance. Is there any other ones? That's the only one. So unless someone wants to volunteer tonight We don't have a convening of the Finance Administration until January. We can ask members to consider over the holidays and fill that position at that time. But I will ask, are there any volunteers to sit on Finance and Administration? Okay, well, perhaps we'll just wait until January when we have a chance to think about that. So you'll be closing debate. Well, we just took them off, so I don't know if we need to do that anything further. So report as amended. Mr. Clerk? I think we did. We voted on the amendment. Yes, we did. We did. Okay, so the report as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we'll move into Finance and Administration Committee. This is Councillor Hawkins for the advance approval of the capital projects for the city. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. The CR 17138, recommendation of the Finance and Administration Committee that advance approval be provided for the following items. Number one, that reads 46 million. It should read 43,326,111 dollars. So with that number be provided for the 2018 general fund capital projects identified in Appendix A to provide sufficient time within each project to meet deadlines and completion dates. 2, 4.2 million to be provided for the 2018 community investment grants allocation to allow community investments to be provided to funded agencies without delay. And 3, transfer 2 million from the winter maintenance reserve to the social development reserve to fund the 2018 funding commitments for the housing incentive program.
A seconder, please. Any seconders? Councillor Young? Do you want to speak to it further?
Yes, very briefly, Your Worship. This is a motion that frequently comes forward when it's necessary to provide capital funding for projects prior to the budget being passed, so that those projects can be tendered out, so that the necessary arrangements can be made with respect to those projects and the funding in question here to enable work to proceed without delay pending approval of the budget. In this case, the request for general fund capital projects is 43,326,111, as I mentioned, which represents approximately 36% of the total general fund capital budget. And the details of this allocation of this funding is provided in Appendix A.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Speakers to the report. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks. I fully support what's before us, but I seek some clarity on the bridge infrastructure renewal. Can I ask one? Is this a bridge, by the way, that happens to be in that urban connector program, but we don't use that phrase anymore?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through Your Worship, this is a program that looks at a number of bridges throughout our city. In the 2018 program, I believe there are 2 bridges that service ramps coming off of what is considered an urban highway connector. So I do believe they would have been part of the assets turned over from the Ministry of Highways to the City of Regina under that program.
So these would still be, in the old term, this would have been done by the province, but in the new world of reality, we get to do it?
That's correct.
Can I have an update from the administration just where the urban connector program is? Any indication from the province as to many millions of dollars will be flowing our way?
Ms. Gizmo, do you want to try that one?
I'll start, and then perhaps I'll ask Mr. Kyle. I haven't received an update recently. Certainly in the past years, we put forward projects. I think we're allowed to put 2 projects forward a year for funding. We have not received funding in the last number of years. I'll check with Mr. Kyle this year's application if there's any anticipation of funding this year.
Mr. Kyle.
To you, Mr. Chair, we are updating our submissions with the province and reevaluating our priorities for bridges under the UHCP because our last 2 priorities have now been completed. The bridge over Vic Avenue and the Wascana. This bridge infrastructure renewal budget does include, as Ms. Gazmo mentioned, 2 bridges, service road, ring road, Rovers Road bridges, as well as some other pedestrian bridge work within the city, replacement and upgrades. We don't anticipate hearing from the province until their budget in the spring. We will be receiving our annual operating grant from them, which they have increased in the past year to recognize the work we have been doing under the program. We would hope that these would be a priority, but again, it's up to the province for the final decision.
Can I just seek clarity, Mr. Mayor? So we are or have or will apply for additional funding this coming year?
Mr. Kyle?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, as projects are completed and our priorities change, we upgrade our priorities for the province, and we give them updated, the priority list and updated funding list because the cost of the bridges are different. I would hope, because we haven't seen any money since 2015, we may be in for luck this year, but not counting on anything until we get it.
Thanks for that. I just will forewarn that when we are doing our budget, I will update all of you as to how much money we've spent on the Urban Connector program and how much funding we have received. And further to that, as part of SUMA's board, I will have the opportunity to meet directly with the Minister of Highways and Infrastructure, and I will update him as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers to the report? Councillor Hawkins, do you want to close debate? I'll call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Report 139, which is a leased property to the RM of Sherwood.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Hawkins.
This is a recommendation of the Finance and Administration Committee. I'll read it. 1, the lease of a portion of city-owned property located within the Northwest 1819 W2M of the rural municipality of Sherwood be approved consistent with the terms and conditions stated in this report. 2, that the administration be authorized to finalize any other commercially relevant terms and conditions with respect to the lease documents. And 3, that the city clerk be authorized to execute the lease agreement documents as prepared by the city solicitor.
Seconder for the report, please. Councillor Murray.
Your Worship, I'll just explain this very briefly. This is a piece of land, a field, which the city owns in the RM of Sherwood. It leases a very small portion of that land to the RM of Sherwood for use as a chlorination booster station. This lease all leases would normally be put out to tender. This one isn't being put out to tender, in part because of the unique uses to which it's put, and in part because it's such a small portion of land. The lease in question, which is before council, is at market value, but the property is not being made to the public, and therefore we seek approval of council for this lease.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Further discussion on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. We'll move on to information reports. This is on the engineering works for the residential road renewal program. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. So this is IR 17-17, which is an information report, as you said, which has to do with the value increase for engineering services for residential road renewal program. So this, and maybe I'll ask why. I'll just maybe.
I shall get a seconder first, and then Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Bryce, go ahead.
We did discuss this at Public Works, but maybe I will ask administration to explain why we need this tonight.
To the administration, Ms. Gizmo.
Through your worship, the information report that's in front of you is in regards to a consulting agreement for one of the packages that we put out for the residential road renewal project. During the project, there was some additional work identified and additional design and survey work required, and that required additional consulting services that increased the value of the consulting agreement over the $500,000. And the $500,000 level requires us to come and report to council of that increase.
Thank you. And maybe I'll ask some more questions just so everybody's aware of why we need this. So is this work that could have been foreseen in the project? Somebody low bid us and then add more work to it? What is the information here?
Ms. Gizmo.
Through your worship, no, that's not the case here. The contract was bid on material provided by our staff and the administration and survey information that was available. During the project, it was identified that some things couldn't be corrected as originally anticipated, and as such, additional design work was required to complete the work.
Thank you. So this is here tonight because there's unforeseen things that happened with this project. So in starting the work, they saw that more work needed to be done. So that's why it's here for us. And I encourage everyone's support.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Other speakers to the report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Notice of motion. Councillor Dowling, yours is on the autonomous vehicles. It's not for debate for tonight. It is simply notice of motion. So I'll let you read the motion, but no debate after that.
Do I need a seconder tonight?
You will need a seconder. Yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. Councillor Murray.
Thanks. So simply read the motion. Whereas the technology for autonomous vehicles has recently advanced rapidly with automakes and tech companies joining in to aggressively gain competitive edge, and whereas manufacturers have invested significant capital to ensure that they ramp up production for the near future, and whereas manufacturers are investing in large fleets of autonomous vehicles to be part of the ride-sharing business, and we now have the start of legislation allowing ride-sharing within the province of Saskatchewan. And whereas there is a concurrent research also occurring with regards to connected vehicles so that congestion can be minimized, along with a reduction in fuel consumption, as well as a method to improve road and pedestrian safety. And whereas there has also been a significant amount of research and investment into electric or battery-powered vehicles and how they may be part of a large commercial autonomous fleets. And whereas it is likely that much of the initial development of autonomous vehicles could likely be large transport vehicles. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of Regina monitor the research and trials that are currently underway and will shortly be undertaken with regards to autonomous and connected vehicles. 2, the administration will report back to the Regina City Council in the second quarter of 2019 with analysis as to the impacts or potential impacts upon the City of Regina of these type of vehicles, and to take into account any impact of a large number of vehicles powered by batteries and the need for charging stations. And 3, the administration give consideration to any advantage the City of Regina may have with being one of the leading edge communities with regards to testing of autonomous vehicles, given our varied climate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. This will be discussed not tonight, of course, but at the January 29th meeting of City Council, next meeting. Move on to bylaws and related reports. We have a committee report 17-140. We did get a seconder, Councillor Murray. Seconded the motion. No voting. No voting. Go, Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. CR 17-140. I would like to add a number 3 to it. I'll read the first couple if I can get a seconder.
Seconder, Councillor Brashani.
Thank you. So this is the Regina Administration Bylaw Changes report, and number 1 is that the amendments in Schedule B of Bylaw number 2003-69, the Regina Administration Bylaw, as contained in this report and Appendix A be approved. Number 2, that City Solicitor be instructed to prepare necessary bylaw amendments as recommended in this report and Appendix A. And I'm going to add a number 3, which is that Appendix B in the report be approved as revised.
Okay, Councillor Brashani moved on the amendment.
Thank you.
Discussion on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Discussion on the report as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 2 bylaws. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. Bylaws are 2017-55 and 56. I move, seconded by Councillor Mancinelli, that bylaws 2017-55 and 56 be introduced and read a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. I move, seconded by Councillor Murray, that bylaws 2017-55 and 56 be read a second time as amended.
Any discussion on the 2? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Thank you. I move, seconded by Councillor Bresciani, that Council hereby consents to bylaws 2017-55 and 56 going to a third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? As carried unanimously.
Thank you. I move, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell, that bylaws 2017-55 and 56 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Before we move adjournment, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the administration for the work over the past year. This is, of course, our last meeting of 2017, and thank you for the work that's been done. And members of council, thank you very much for this. I want to wish everyone all the best season greetings, Merry Christmas, and have a great 2018. A motion to adjourn.
Move adjournment. Thank you.
Mr. Bryce, seconder. Councillor Hawkins, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great evening. What's that?
Amber, she's going to do that. I mean, I can't. Facebook? Here, I'm just going to start.
Sharon, Merry Christmas. I won't see you before. Wow, we're not.